There we go. Okay, I would like to welcome everybody to the third meeting of the iPads and Tablets Users Group. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Adam Hagen. I'm an educational technologist in ITAP, and you guys will be seeing more of me. If you do need to get onto the email list and get access, I'm the point man for that. So in the event that you need to get a hold of me, it's hagenab@purdue.edu. So, and if you're already on the list and you know somebody else that wants to get on, feel free to give them my information. That's not a problem. Another thing is I want to make sure that everybody remembers the wiki. We have had a couple of people get in there. They're adding information about new apps. And like I said, feel free to play around on that one. You don't have to be scared. You're not going to break anything. So really, I mean, feel free to get in there. It's another venue for us to be able to share information with each other, trying to use iPads in an educational context. So it's really just one more avenue for all of us to learn from each other. So as far as our battle plan for the day, we have Hans Agard is going to be demoing a remote desktop application called Splashtop. So I will turn things over to him, and he's going to go through and show you that. Once he wraps up, we're really going to try to get back to the collective app sharing experience that we had in our inaugural meeting. So we'll kind of open up the floor, see if people have questions, if they've got apps that they're excited about and have had success with, and we'll just kind of go from there. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Hans.
Okay. So I'm going to switch over to the doc cam. Okay. So Splashtop is the name of the program, and basically it allows you to access your PC or Mac remotely. And I'll show you an example of that and some of the things you can do with that. Right now, I just looked today, and it was $5. I think they say it's normally $20, but then I read somewhere in the comments that they said it's almost never $20. It's usually between $1 and $5. You also need to install a free piece of software on your either Mac or PC so that there's the connection between them. So I've installed that on both the PC in my office and a Mac laptop in my office, and so I'm going to demonstrate connecting to both of those. So I open up Splashtop, and then these are the two machines that I've connected to. It uses a couple of things that you can either use the IP address, but what I did is use a Google email address and password, and then basically it connects those. It connects the software that I installed on my PC, which has my Google address in it, the software installed on my Mac laptop, which has my Google address in it, and then this, which has my Google address in it, and it sees it. So then I'm going to click on my PC. You can put in a security code. It's basically like a password. So I made mine really easy to remember so that it would work. And then it says connecting. And then you get kind of this thing that will show you the different commands. I'm going to keep it up because I'm not totally familiar with them yet. And there is my desktop, including audio. So for example, here's my email. And I can scroll through that, look at my emails, open up an email, close that. This is Spotify, if you've heard of that program. It's a music program. You notice the audio comes through the iPad and is not playing on the PC. So you can listen to your Fleetwood Mac. Then the PowerPoint, you can put that up. Now the issue with this, if you wanted, for example, to have your PowerPoint run on the machine and then walk around and be able to use it, you'd have to install the Splashtop software on the machine that you're in. Now I tried to install it on the lab machine and it didn't take. So if you wanted to install it on your laptop, bring your laptop in and use a plug-in that way, then you could walk around and control the screen at the front of the room this way. But in terms of the way it's useful here, it's just really doing a lot of things that an iPad can't do natively. For example, on this browser, this is a Flash tutorial. Flash isn't available on the iPad, but you can do all the interactions that you can do in a Flash program via this. So it's sort of a workaround. So it's less of a classroom demonstration tool than it is really a utility and application tool. If you did use one application that we thought of is if you had iPads in your classroom and you have students needing to use things like Flash tutorials, you can have them use this. So that's the PC side. I'm going to log out, and then I'm going to log in again to show you, just to demonstrate that it does work on the Mac side as well. And these can be, those security codes can be the same or different. Mine are the same, because I don't want to have to remember multiple logins. Hopefully that'll work. Oh. And it's possible that this machine went to sleep. I haven't tested it with this one as much. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure why. That's the first time I've seen that, of course. It comes up in the demonstration. But that was my Mac. Let me try that again. Okay, so that's the tool. There was something else I was going to say about it. Oh, they have a series of tools. They have like a Splashtop presenter. They have Splashtop something else, and each of them are like $20. I just am focusing on this one. So the same company that makes this makes a few other apps that do other things, but theoretically, you should be able to do it all. If you can access your machine, you can do everything that you can do on that machine on your iPad. Another thing to be aware of is when you first log in, it automatically changed the screen resolution and size to fit to something smaller that would fit with the iPad. So I think this is probably 1024 by 768 or something, whereas before I have a little bit bigger monitor, and that's not the native resolution. So if I were to go look at that monitor now, it would look a little bit distorted. But it figured that out for you. And it was very easy to set up. I set it up within about 5 minutes. Any questions about it? Go ahead.
What are the icons across the bottom for? Is that just showing what's up on your...
The icons across the bottom, that's just Windows 7. That's just what Windows 7 looks like. That's my Windows 7 desktop. So I mean, if you look, this is another thing that it's not quite, you kind of take a guess when you minimize things, but it's just my desktop. Yeah.
Someone wanted to know if you open Word, can you type in it and use it?
Oh, sure, yeah. So here's Word, and then you notice down here in the bottom right-hand corner there's a little bubble, and that's the keyboard. So I can bring the keyboard up. So basically you could use this as a word processor. The most useful thing I see in this in terms of like day-to-day work, there are some programs here at Purdue like Taleo or things like that that'll only work with Internet Explorer. I haven't found a good workaround on the iPad for that, actually on the Mac either. So that might be a good use for it. And then also for things like Outlook, sometimes my iPad calendar is an email or sketchy in terms of meetings and whether it accepts them or has them repeat or whatever. So accessing Outlook is another thing that could be useful for. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Can you zoom in on the image that way you get a little more fine nuance?
You kind of can. So if that zoom in does work, it pixelates like it would, but yeah, but you can zoom in. And then if you kind of
interact with it zoomed in, or is it like a frozen?
That's a good question. No, you can still interact with it. Yeah. What was the other question over here?
If you go into slideshow mode, can you annotate slides while you're connected? Or?
That's a good question. So let's do that. Hide my keyboard. Go to slide mode. Now I think it's just going to be the way it would be if you had a regular computer. So you have to go down, grab your annotation, grab your pen, and do things like that. But you can, yeah. But again, this is still showing up. The place this is showing up is my, maybe we should close this guy. The place this is showing up is my monitor that is back in my office. So again, if you're going to do this, if I had my laptop here, that would be one workaround.
So you checked with an iPad computer in a classroom, but there's no portable, like thumb drive access, that you can't get thumb drive in there, run it on the...
Not that I've seen. Yeah, I think the level of control that it needs over the computer, that that just in my brief understanding of it, it wouldn't be possible. It might be the kind of thing where if it's extremely useful like this, we may be able to work with, like the guys over on the 5th floor of Young that we work with are the ones that are in charge of the lab machines. It may be a tool that we could install. If it is free, and if they test it and it passes testing in terms of security, it might be useful. I'm sure it is a useful tool, so it might be something useful to have. If you're a faculty member, I would put in that request, and it will be taken more seriously than if I were to put it in. So I would recommend that a faculty member do that. Actually, is Byron here? Here he is. Byron, what are your thoughts on that?
We would have to test it because, yeah, security would be the biggest concern.
Yeah.
Because my guess is that it wants a higher level of administrative organization.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hans, could you repeat that for folks?
So the question was, so Byron Reed, who's the head of Learning Spaces, is here, and I asked him, and he said they just would need to test it because of the level of security that it would probably require on the machine in terms of administration. They'd have to test it out. Alex?
Do you know, so right now back in your office, is this visible?
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of like Mac screen sharing. So if somebody was sitting there at your desk, they could mess with your presentation here?
They could, yes.
Okay.
It goes both ways. In fact, I would work on this, and then if I did change anything on my desktop, it would just change it on here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's sort of like a remote sync.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's how Mac does screen sharing. Anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I have to work around to address the issue about security on campus machines. I've been trying to log in ever since you started your demo, and there's something called OnLive Desktop. Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm.
It's basically an instance of Windows running in the cloud and streamed to your iPad. And right now it's free, but I would imagine since by the looks of it, it's probably getting overwhelmed right now.
Okay.
We are going to have a paid service, but I got to play around with it a little bit at home when it first came out, and it was actually pretty slick. Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave, I'm sure. But I mean, it's just like you have there. It's full-fledged Windows environment on your iPad.
And that was called OnLive
It's
Desktop?
called OnLive Desktop.
Okay, so OnLive, so just so I'm repeating it for audience at home.
OnLive.
OnLive Desktop is basically a Windows,
Yeah, it's running in the cloud. So
it's an instance of Windows that runs in the cloud and
this
that you can
company
stream to your
apparently
iPad.
has Windows licenses for X number of users, and eventually they're going to have a premium service where you will have priority access.
Okay,
The intent is to have it free, and there's also going to be some number of gigabytes of free cloud storage.
okay.
And the nice thing is, as I said, right now it's totally free, but the priority access will eventually have a service fee with it.
So right now it's free, but it'll eventually be priority access. Basically a paid
Yes.
service sort of thing.
Yeah, I think they will always have a free account, but if you want sort of priority service, you'll get the premium subscription.
Okay. So we can we can put that down in the connect room, but then also we can add that to the wiki notes for today. Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right. I'll turn it back over to Adam.
Okay, so I really wanted to, and it looks like it's going to work out okay. I wanted to use the majority of today's session really, to get back to that whole, kind of share your ideas, what strategies have worked for you, and then if you have apps and would like to come up and show what you've been using. So, does anybody have anything really interesting that they'd really like to show off to the rest of the group? Everybody's going to be shy? Yeah. Okay. And then I was going to say, if you are going to come up and share an app and you're going to be talking, since we are recording this, try to stay within this general region. Otherwise, we lose you as far as the video feed. But yeah, okay. Go ahead. And then, yeah, if you can
Okay.
either,
All
yeah,
right.
just put it down.
I'm Daryl Schultz. I'm in the agronomy department, and I deal with. I've got. I use mobile maps in teaching, and I have done that for the last 6 years, running on rugged tablet PCs with ArcGIS, and we're trying to move to an iPad platform. And over the Christmas holidays, I found something called Mapbox. It's a free application that you can download. And I'm moving the content that we have here. I've still got some transparency issues I've got to solve here. But as I'll zoom in, and this is a whole stack of maps at different resolutions. So you can see that it gets better and better as you zoom in. You can put your legend off to the side and slide it up out of the way if you want. Right now I've got 3 maps, and what we use is we switch between maps to teach different concepts. So for example, this is a drainage class map, and the one that's up here now is a parent material map. So for example, West Lafayette is, we're sitting right here. The campus is right there. The green is coarse sand and gravel. If you see when they dig up, when they build a new building, it's like digging in a pile of sand. The tan is real compact stuff that was compacted by the glacier. And one of the points we try to make to our students is that the drainage of the natural drainage of those soils is very different because of those different parent materials. And now you can see that the green areas are largely well drained, no high water table, and the gray ones, these areas are poorly drained. You'll have wet basements and stuff like that. So and that gives you some sense of what we're doing. I've also got an 1852 map that I found on the Library of Congress website, and you can zoom into that, and let's see, here you can see that the Western Plank Road, that's US 52 today. So, but this is free. You can they have something called Tile Mill, which tiles all of these, and I use the data is originally in ArcGIS, and I pull this out, and you can retile it in Tile Mill. What's really appealing to me is that I can load all of this into the iPad, and I don't need to worry about having a wireless connection or a cell phone connection when we're using this out in the field. So, and then there's other things that you can do with it in terms of interrogating maps. I've not worked with those features, but we can just turn 1 or 2 of these on, and I can, let me turn this off here. And I'll have to zoom out. I think that'll show up, but you can put these tags on and have pop-up boxes. And this one has an external link. I think that link is broken, but there's a lot of things you can do with this, and once you get your data worked up, it's got some really nice features. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that if you've got an interest in that. So. Okay. Thanks.
All right, so do we have anybody else that was just burning the show in? Yeah. Okay.
So I'm Mark Sharp with the College of Pharmacy, and we do a lot of video production, video conferencing over at the college. One program I have to show is Polycom's new video conferencing software. And right now it's free. Knowing Polycom, it probably won't be free for a real long time. But if anybody does video conferencing and they connect to life-size units or Polycom or Tandberg or whatever brand video conferencing that does H.323, you can download this software and then just call the IP address. And hopefully nobody's in our conference room in Indy. Yeah, didn't answer. I may have lost my network connection. Actually, oops. See if I can use the software properly. Okay, so right now I'm connecting to our conference unit in Johnson B17, which is showing why we can connect to Indianapolis, because we're actually still connected to Indianapolis. But so we're actually in a three-way call right now. So if somebody was over in Johnson B17, we could be participating in a three-way video conference with that in Indianapolis. So if, ITAP has multi-point video conferencing, so you could use their conference units. Or there are several other people here on campus that have it. This requires the iPad too, though, because you need the camera on it. Does anybody else do any sort of video production, pre-recording lectures, pre-recording anything? Nobody? A few people? Not with the iPad? Well, one program that I found that is actually pretty handy is a program called ProPrompter, which is used for teleprompting for video production. And if you've got a iPad and an iPhone, it's nice because once you have downloaded the software, I think it's $10, you can actually use your iPhone as a remote control for the teleprompter. So what I've got is a few scripts listed here. I've connected to the iPad with my iPhone, so I have several different scripts available here. And now what I can do is I can actually go in. I've started on my phone. It's acting as a remote. You see that's upside down and backwards. That's because right now it's set up to mirror through a teleprompter that will go down into the front of the camera. But I can control it using my iPhone, pausing it, starting it. So if we have somebody that, when we're shooting and they're reading the script, I can sit here and I can watch on my phone and pause and start as necessary. So, and then this is actually configurable, so it doesn't actually have to be reversed. You can set it up so you can hold it up in front of your face or put it on just hang it above a camera or something. So that's pretty handy.
What's the name of this app?
ProPrompter.
What's the name of the first app?
It's
The video
Polycom. I can't remember. Polycom Video is all they call it. If you do a search on iTunes or the App Store for Polycom, you do it through an iPad, it'll show up.
They call it Real Presence.
Yeah, Polycom Real Presence.
But it also works for Tandberg and other systems.
Anything that does H.323. And it does not do content sharing. So if you do share content, it all gets encoded into one video stream rather than having the two separate streams. Now I think if you have the Real Presence server, it will do the content sharing. But I'm just doing a direct connection via IP.
But it will show the content or the video?
It'll show content or video, but it scan converts the content, so you lose resolution.
Okay, so we have anybody else that's got something? Yes.
Yeah, I have a few things.
Okay.
Hi, I'm James Britton with Student Affairs. Just to follow up on OnLive Desktop, there it is. Right now, as I said, it's free. They seem to be having some growing pains. It gives you 2 gigabytes of cloud storage, and again, you don't get the priority access. The Pro is coming soon, and that will give you priority access, and 50 gigabytes, and that's $9.99 a month. But as I said, I played with it a little bit. It was pretty interesting. I found it difficult to sort of tap on the really small areas. There's a reason that iOS 5 has the interface that it does, in my opinion. Windows 7 doesn't really transfer well to a tablet interface. So, but in a pinch, you can browse the web, you can use Word, you can use Excel. So, if you absolutely must have those applications, it works in a pinch. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to show, I don't know if you missed the announcement, but I find this completely fascinating. The iBooks textbook platform. There's a free download to try it out. E.O. Wilson's biology textbook. The first couple chapters are free. But this is a whole platform built by Apple. There's an iBooks author tool for Mac only. It's a free download, and it's free to upload to the iTunes store. You can put your content out there for free if you like, or you can sell it for a cost. Their goal is to have textbooks accessible to everybody for $15 or less, which I think is a noble goal for them. And there is a catch, though. If you do make one for selling for profit, you must sell it on the iTunes store. In other words, you can't use iBooks Author to create a fancy textbook and then sell it on xyz.com website. If you're going to sell something that you created in iBooks Author, you must sell it on iTunes. So you have to sort of play by their rules, but it's a really powerful tool. I played around with it a little bit at home on my Mac, and it's pretty cool. I mean, you could, if you had content already, it would just be a matter of like gathering up the multimedia files, video. It does cool things like 3D. You can manipulate 3D renderings. This is really nice. You just drag to highlight, and you can click on that and make a note. Rather, I underlined it, sorry. So you can make I think here's the note feature. So you just say, important. And then, when you're ready to study, you can see your notes up here. And you have all of your notes, all of your highlights. There's where I marked important. You can obviously be more detailed than that. Skip around to different chapters, see where your notes are, and it's a great review tool. I mean, to me, it really is the future of publishing and textbooks. The idea with this is that it's going to be, just like your apps update whenever there's a bug fix or an update or whatever. The same is true for this. So you spend $15 on a textbook, and it's a history book, and history is in the making. With things like the Arab Spring, the author can just zap out the updated information, and it's a living, breathing textbook. So again, the couple of caveats are you have to have a Mac to author, and if you're going to sell it, you have to sell it through the iTunes store. But again, I really think it's the future of publishing. And then just one last thing. Again, that's called iBooks textbook, and then the companion authoring tool for Mac is iBooks Author. And the last thing I wanted to show, this is pretty cool, a little plug for a Purdue staff member, if you will. Keith Kroc is the chairman of the Purdue Board of Trustees, and he's actually CEO of DocuSign Inc. And it actually is pretty cool. I'm a big fan of getting rid of paper. So let's say, you're filling out a lease agreement, and, somebody has emailed you the PDF or whatever. You can import that. I've already signed this one here, but I'll just show you. You just go to your signature. You've already, I guess I've already done my signature. Let me see if I can go back and fix my signature. Here, I'll do my initials. So you just drag and drop it. You place it onto your document. That'll save that back into a PDF, and you can email it off to your landlord or your lawyer or whatever. So you can see here it attaches it as an email. Right now that's free. It also has, I haven't played too much around with it, but it has integration with other tools such as Adobe Acrobat, obviously. I think big companies are adopting this as well. So paper is dead, I guess.
DocuSign?
Yes, that's called, I'll go back to the logo there, DocuSign Inc. Right there. And as you can see, you can even like take a photo if you didn't have a scanner, you know, but you needed it to sign this document here. You just take a photo, snap that, sign it, send it off, and it's as good as your own signature. So, plus it has the ability to store your identity in here. This is how you kind of manage your identity. So if you don't like your signature, you can get rid of it and change it. And again, that's free. I think pretty much everything I've shown today is free. Yeah.
Can you password protect that section in case somebody stole your no?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Certainly you can password protect your iPad altogether with a code. That's probably the best bet. And then I do know, depending on how you have your security settings, you can set it up so that you can do a remote wipe of your iPad. So basically, it doesn't really wipe the data. It just, as I understand, just gets rid of the token to allow access. I'm not a huge expert on that, but I think that's how it works. Yeah.
With the iPad author, it's probably good to note that those books can only be read on an iPad, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's the other caveat. So, I mean, obviously, iPad is a huge market, as the biggest tablet market so far. But that's exactly right. I mean, you would spend a lot of time developing this rich content, and it's only available on iTunes and on an iPad. However, there are plenty of EPUB tools that can convert that are free. Pages, for example, is a really cheap clone of Microsoft Word that Apple has, and you can just quickly export to EPUB, which is readable on any mobile device. Essentially, it's pretty much what the Kindle uses. Although, to argue that point, Amazon uses their own proprietary format as well, but EPUB is readable on pretty much every platform. So there are free tools for that. Yep.
Amazon uses their own code, but they have apps for just other platforms, so it's a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so the thing, Apple created their own system because there really wasn't a format out there that allowed for this rich multimedia experience. EPUB 3 doesn't even really address all those issues. And certainly you don't have like the notes functionality, highlighting sections, making a quick study guide, that sort of thing. So, they've just sort of augmented it. You could debate all day and all night about proprietary formats, but that's their will, I suppose. So, great, thanks.
All right, do we have anybody else that has something to share? Yes.
Question.
Yes, what's your question?
So if I'm using Keynote to do a PowerPoint presentation in the classroom, my students have informed me that I can use my iPhone as remote, the iRemote. Has anyone done that, and does it work well?
I haven't done it, but we had, I don't think that was today that somebody showed that. The Keynote remote?
I think it was George Collins.
Was it George? Okay. Yeah, no, it's there and it does work.
It's like Keynote Presenter, right?
Yeah, it's either I don't think it's Keynote Presenter. I want to say it's Keynote Remote.
Keynote Remote.
Yeah, for iPhone. But it is there, and I can check that. I don't know. I don't believe that George added that to the wiki, but we can get that on there as another tool when we go through to get the notes written up from today and get that stuff added. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
99 cents. Keynote remote.
Okay, so 99 cents Keynote Remote.
We had a question online. Does anyone know of any good chat tools, chat apps?
It looks like a no, that nobody.
There's IM Plus. It's a free chat app that's ad supported and supports AIM, MSN, Google Talk, ICQ. Everybody's still using ICQ.
Okay, so anybody else? Comments, questions, interesting apps? Stan, did you have?
I'll say it once.
You're gonna save next one? Okay.
Show you one real quick. Turn on the chat.
This is a relatively new app, if I can find it. New to me, at least. It may not be new. Let me find it.
Are you looking?
Group whiteboard one. There it is. In fact, let me go back up a little bit. There's one called Group Board.
Can you bump up your brightness there?
Pardon? The brightness?
Yeah. Did you say your button's white?
I think this is actually fine. It should be.
And swipe to the right.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Swipe the bottom to the right. Sorry. So do double click, swipe the bottom to the right, and then on the left you'll have your on the very bottom.
Very bottom. Okay.
Yeah. Swipe icons to the left.
There we go.
That's your brightness.
Oops. How's that? All right. It's called Group Board. It's a free app, and it's the same thing where you can create on their servers. You can create a board ID and a password, and then everybody who has that group ID and a password can come into use the Group Board app, come into this group, and it's just a shared whiteboard application, so you can write anything you want using this. It works really well with a stylus if you have one, but then other people who are in the group can also write on that as well. I've tried using this just kind of with my daughter a little bit and doing math equations just to test it out, where I would write a math equation, she would come in and do the steps from right next to me, but on another iPad. And it seemed to work real well. She'd go through. There's a chat feature as well. Of course, there's nobody connected, so it's kind of hard to chat with yourself. But so you can stop people mid or and kind of explain what's going on through the chat windows. There's that feature as well. So it's a nice little application for collaborative work. If you just want to get people together and do whiteboard stuff. Haven't played with it a whole lot, checked all the options. Downside is that you can password protect your groups, but all the groups are readily accessible or available. You can go in and search and see all the groups that are out there. And unfortunately, it's one of those things, especially in dealing with my 8th grade daughter, people can name their groups whatever they want, and they're quite creative. To say the least. So there's that kind of, not a lot of censorship going on. You didn't know what I mean?
What was this called?
It's called Group Board. Again, it's free right now. It's one of those things. It's a new app, free right now. We'll see how long it stays free. I'm sure there will be a service cost associated with it in the future if it takes off.
We have a question online. Group board be used to have collaborative teams in class and then present back to a large group, so team members don't need to be in the same location.
Yes, you could do that. And I was thinking about just doing anything collaboratively through a whiteboard. Then you could do it remotely. You'd have to give the group ID out to other people if they're remote, but you could present back to a larger group. Another thing you can do is you can do a quick screen capture and you have an image of whatever you did on the whiteboard, and share it that way. If you wanted to share it through posting, for example, in a class environment, you could do something, remotely share, have them capture it through the quick screen capture and post it on Blackboard or something like that. Other questions? While I'm up here, I'll just show you this website real quick. I don't know if you've heard of Geekazine. Geekazine has a part of their site is the iPad 365. Very interesting gentleman here. It's always kind of fun to actually go through the videos and find out what shirt he wears each day. But what he's doing is just kind of showcasing an app a day. And if you go and kind of thumb through the archives, you can get a lot of different ideas for different apps. He has each day of the week is dedicated to one certain type of app. So he does productivity one day, he does utilities one day, he does games one day, and so forth. But pretty good archive of different apps that might be useful. Some to do with education, some not. The website's geekazine.com /category/iPad 365. It's pretty easy to find.
Okay, so before we wrap stuff up, does anybody else have any questions? Any last minute volunteers to come up and share an app? No? Okay, well, we'll go ahead then. We'll end a couple of minutes early, which will work out for all of you that are teaching 3:30s. But just keep in mind that if you know anybody that needs to get on the email list, contact me. Feel free to get in and add to the wiki. Okay, you guys aren't gonna, like I said, you're not gonna break anything, and that's why it's there. So we'll go ahead, as soon as we have a date and time scheduled for the next meeting, I'll send an email out to the group, post an announcement on the wiki, and then always look for little reminders and stuff coming through on Purdue Today. So thank you everybody who shared, and I will see you guys next time.